Hey neighbors, Kevin here with the eTrailer, and today we're going to be talking about equalizer upgrades for your tandem axle or triple axle trailer. Now, if you don't have all the bells and whistles with your trailer, you're typically going to find that your equalizer looks like this guy right here. If we take a closer look at our bushings, you can see this one has a big chip taken out of it already. This one was pressed in too far. This is only a 2-year-old equalizer. It shouldn't really look this way. It shouldn't be all kind of blown out and brown and rusted out like this one is. So having those nylon bushings are pretty easy. You know, you're not really doing maintenance, but if you're not watching it, and depending on the environment your trailer's sitting in, you could really run into some issues that bronze bushings could solve. If we take a closer look at this other one that we took off of a trailer that came into the shop, you can see that bushing ate away, no one took care of it, and then it started eating down through the equalizer. And what happens with that is now we have a whole lot of up and down motion, and that's going to leave so much play that the top of the leaf springs are actually going to hit the frame of the trailer, and then those are going to start wearing down. You'll probably see the top of the leaf springs. They should be rounded, but you'll see a flat spot on them. That's how you know your equalizer's hitting, or your leaf spring is hitting your frame, and you've got a big problem. So this one's obviously a case of a lot of negligence. Nothing was really taken care of and looked at. And what happens with that is the rest of your suspension components can start to get damaged as well. And then instead of just spending a little bit of money on your equalizer, now you're spending money on the whole suspension for your trailer. So that's where all of our upgraded options start to come into play, especially if your trailer has any kind of road shock issues or vibration that you're really feeling up at the tow vehicle. So why don't we take a quick look at some of our more premium options here. So looking left to right here, we are starting out with our Dexter Easy Flex. Next we have the Lippert Road Armor, and then from MORryde we have the CRE 3000. Now there are a few more MORryde options out there. This was just kind of the best one that we had for our trailer today. The resounding theme with all of these is, though, that there's a little bit more movement with them, and then there's a rubber pad to kind of cushion and absorb all that road shock and give you a much smoother ride versus our old ones where there's no cushioning at all. Starting with the Dexter Easy Flex, the couple of features on here. So it is 2 separate pieces that come together and then press on this cushion that we see on the inside here. So as one axle hits a speed bump, starts to lift up, it's going to start trying to force that pressure back onto the other axle, and so that's where this cushion comes into play, kind of fighting back and rebounding it back out. Up at the top we have some grease zerk fittings. So this one, with it being a upgraded equalizer, there is going to be some maintenance required. The grease zerk will help lube up the center here and kind of help that flow nice and easily back and forth. And we also have bronze bushings on the inside, so that's something you don't see on your typical equalizer. This will require a wet bolt, and you will need to regularly grease it so that way you don't wear out the bushing. If you aren't greasing it, you are going to blow those bushings out eventually. The heat from that bolt as it's sitting there and working back and forth without grease will eventually wear that down to where now you're going to have some play in it, and then you could start to see some issues like we did with our previous one. If we look at our Road Armor equalizer, that's also going to have those bronze bushings, so you will have the added expense of those wet bolts and then the maintenance that's going to go along with that. Now this one's a little bit different. It has 2 separate cushions on the top and the bottom here, and what that does is it kind of fights it as your equalizer kind of goes back and forth. So it's not really going to have much up and down play, but it is going to give you that front to back play between the 2 axles. Last here we have our MORryde CRE 3000. What this is going to have is that cushion so that you get that front to back play tightened up a whole bunch, and then you're absorbing that road shock, but then it also is going to have some travel up and down. So typically when you're hitting all those bumps in the road, you're going to see your suspension kind of compress and rebound back out. This allows a little bit of a gap so it can kind of easily ease its way into it, and then also hit that bumper on the inside so that you're absorbing all that road shock right down at the suspension versus having it all up at the front of the vehicle. Along with it, it is going to have those bronze bushings. MORryde has a great suspension upgrade kit. I highly recommend checking theirs out. It has much thicker shackle straps so that you're not replacing those shackle straps or ever worrying about them starting to bend or kind of wear through. Now each of these are a premium option that is going to give you a better ride quality and kind of help with all that road shock and vibration. But if you're in a situation where you feel like maybe these aren't going to be the right fit for you, maybe you're having much more extreme shock coming through your trailer to where maybe you can't even drive it safely. That's where we have a couple of heavier duty options to start looking at. So for those more extreme cases, we have the Roadmaster Comfort Ride system, and we have the Trailer air spring system for your trailer. And what these are going to be is, for this one, this is going to replace the Equalizer, so it is going to have to clamp onto that hanger. Now on the other side here with the Roadmaster Comfort Ride, this is going to have a slipper spring box, and it's going to allow those two axles to kind of flow in and out independently. So now you don't have one axle kind of forcing the other one around. And then to go with that, they're also going to have their Comfort Ride shocks to help with that rebound, give you a much smoother ride quality. Out of these two, the Comfort Ride system is definitely going to be my favorite. I've actually installed this one myself quite a few times. You can even check out some of my install videos just so you can get a closer look at how this functions and just what's going to be needed for the install. Now with this, you are replacing pretty much the entire suspension. You are going to be swapping out a few components that you'll also need to kind of pick up separately with it. So you're going to need some new U-bolts. But overall, this gives you those two independent axles so that they can easily slide back and forth without interacting with each other, and then you're not having that kind of gallop feeling from the trailer as it starts to bounce. And when it is bouncing, you'll have the shocks to dampen that right back down so that the trailer is not throwing you all around on the road. Overall, this one is a lot easier to install and doesn't really have as many clearance issues as some of the other ones do. Like our trailer over here. So with our trailer center point, the issue that we typically run into, and we've had quite a few trailers come through and they just don't have the clearance. So once we get this in and we check and see slip our hanger on, we find that this air spring is now contacting the floor of the trailer. So typically you're really only going to be able to use this if you have a larger flatbed trailer where you've got all that clearance from the bottom of the frame up to those wood slats that you have put into it for the floor. But if you do have the clearance, this would be great for all those heavy equipment haulers, because once you load all that heavy equipment on there, you can kind of fill up the air spring and get that PSI just right so that you're not getting all that chucking back and forth. But then once you unload all that and you're hauling your trailer back, you can lower that PSI back so that you have a nice smooth ride quality on the way back. Now that we've gone over the options available, let's talk about how you determine which one's actually going to fit. Now, the first thing that we're going to need for all of these is to determine what our axle capacity is. And you can find that by looking at the axle tube. There's typically going to be a sticker facing towards the rear of the trailer. If that's not there, then we are going to have to do a little bit more digging to figure out exactly what your capacity is, and then we can move on to the measuring phase. To measure, we're going to go from center to center, horizontally from our shackle strap bolt holes, and then we're also going to need to measure from that center line up to our hanger bolt hole. Now we want these measurements to match up with our previous Equalizer, otherwise you can have an issue with the shackle straps and the leaf springs where they start to bind. Either one way, too far in, too far out, that's where you're going to start to have some issues. So when you look at your suspension, you should see basically a W shape with your Equalizer and the shackle straps. With the Roadmaster Comfort Ride, there's a little bit less. You're not having to measure that horizontal or vertical distance just because the leaf springs, the slipper springs that we have here, are independent, so we don't have that issue where coming in or maybe going out a little bit further would bind up our suspension, just because it's all housed right here and all of the previous suspension that we had is now replaced. With the center point, there isn't this, hey, I need to measure, my shackle straps or measuring the bolt hole distance, but there is a lot more that's going to be involved with this installation. So if you are curious about this, you think this might be a good fit for maybe your equipment trailer or maybe a larger fifth wheel, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to help you figure out if this is actually going to be the correct fit for your trailer, or if you're going to have to switch over to one of our other options. Well, that is going to do it for today's look at our upgraded Equalizer options for your trailer. If you still have some questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to help you get your trailer up and running for a nice and smooth journey.